This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're coming to you live from Signature Bank in scenic Edison Park. We're kicking off our 2019 Signature Bank AM 560 Business Tour, third annual. And joining us to talk a little bit about that. Fourth annual?
Fourth annual.
Is it?
Well, you've been getting it wrong
How
all
long have
morning.
How long have I been here?
You've been here for 4 years, going on your fifth.
Oh, all right.
Okay,
the fourth
so-
annual,
hey,
as
the
I was
fourth
saying,
annual.
Signature Bank
Woo,
Business Tour.
yay!
Yeah. First year was sort of a trial run. I don't really count
I'm
that.
here to correct you.
Yeah, thank you very much. He is Kevin Bastuga, co-founder and executive VP of Signature Bank, the George Bailey of Chicago banking, as I like to call you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Amicable banker.
So Signature Bank truly is my business bank. It's where I bank. And
Thank you.
And this has been your focus. This sort of was the great insight that you and your colleagues had. Is Chicago needs a bank for the owner operator, the inveterate entrepreneur in this city, manufacturing, but across sector.
Absolutely correct. So, we continue to grow, continue to focus on that part of what we call the, basically the lower middle market, focusing on owner operators, family-owned businesses here in the city, really across the 6-county area, and, expanding a little bit outside of that footprint as well. The nice part about Chicago, despite some of the economic challenges, is that there is a large population of small businesses, and that population base has been a phenomenal job creator during this expansion. So it's something that we've been able to take advantage of as those companies expand. They need capital to expand, both in terms of hiring people and plant and equipment. And we've been there as a financing source and a depositing bank, and handle their cash management, treasury management needs, and try to be the one-stop shop for those owner-operators.
Well, how many, and it's sad but true, but how many small businesses fold within the first year? And how do you as a bank try and help them, but you can't, you can only do so much?
Yeah, so, it's a tough balance with smaller companies that, reach a certain revenue size and think that they, can go to a bank and get capital. Really, in startup mode, it's tough for a bank to provide bank debt, because that initial risk is more appropriately funded with equity from the owner. So we're not really funding startup companies, and there's not many senior debt provider large banks that are providing startup capital that's more appropriate for the VCs and the private equity players. But once a company is established over a few years and has a couple years of financials and some validated performance, that's normally when we step in on the lending side. We're happy to bank those companies from the get-go in terms of providing them deposit products.
Well, I have some good news for you. Nobody's starting a business in Chicago, so you don't have to worry about it. So for the 5th annual Signature Bank Business Tour, will we be doing this in Hammond next year? When do you follow the business expansion that you're underwriting to the actual cities that they're expanding to?
So, it's something that's a constant concern for us is, we see some of our larger clients looking toward the borders, both south and north. And the companies that have moved specifically up to Wisconsin, some of the feedback that we're getting, I just talked to an owner last week for a deal that we just closed. Labor is the issue, so these companies are pouring over the border, but then they're experiencing, a labor shortage because there's so many companies that have moved up there and are trying to staff up. So each move has its own challenges. The state certainly has its own challenges. Governor Pritzker is in a very unique position to do what he said he was going to do and try to start to right the ship.
Mm-hmm.
But the owners and customers that we speak to, the overarching concern is this pension overhang. It's to as an owner, look at the landscape and have the thought that I'm going to continue to risk my own capital, my family's capital, my shareholders' capital to expand business and create jobs for the right of being taxed at an increasing rate in perpetuity, both at the corporate level and at the personal level, is it's a message that really doesn't play that well.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, I'd be interested too, like what you hear from clients when they see sort of the corporate C-suite types, like the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club, like the Chicago Fed, propose, as the Chicago Fed did, a dedicated property tax increase to fund pensions over the next 30 years, propose, as the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club did, all the Fortune 500 CEOs, some of whom are no longer Illinois residents, oh, by the way, but proposing an increase in the state and the personal and corporate income tax. I mean, how do your clients respond to that?
It's I'd say that image is pretty rejected because, again, we're dealing with owner operators that maybe the owner sits in his office for 6 hours a day, but he's also out walking the plant and he knows every single person, every machine operator, down to the janitor and building engineer that works for him. So that's just not, that's our client base. And these people are doers. They are not insulated from their business. Their personal wealth is affected by those decisions. And, we sort of have a special place in our heart for those folks that, as we have done, put our personal capital on the line, created a lot of jobs, created a lot of opportunity for a lot of folks. So to have people at the commercial club who sort of are flying at 50,000 feet saying everybody should just be willing to pay more, is a message that's generally rejected. As you guys have both talked about on the show a number of times, as bankers, we see a lot of businesses. And when we see businesses that want to fix a problem with more revenue instead of managing expenses, that's a little bit of a red flag. And that's exactly what's happening with the state and has been happening for 20, 30 years, right? So it's
Why
a concern.
Why don't you run for office in 4 years?
I'm having too much fun at
Governor
the bank.
Bastuga. Huh? Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe like park board, something, get your feet wet.
Well, I mean, something with a pension.
Well, of course, exactly.
Right,
Why shouldn't you get cut in?
Exactly, right. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mention how knowledgeable your clients are, the bank's clients are, about the unfunded pension liabilities and the gathering storm, and they recognize that, as some politicians have said about businesses in Chicago, including a former governor, Pat Quinn, the people, those people, the businesses, those are the people with the ability to pay. So, they kind of feel like when it all comes crashing down and the math is sort of inexorable, they're going to be left holding the bag or taking the hit.
That's right. And this story has played out before in other municipalities, right? That this whole concept that those who can pay should be willing and should be really happy to pay. I think that wave is starting to crash on shore. The pension overhang needs to be dealt with. I think in this last election cycle, albeit with J.B. Pritzker being elected, I think it was elevated a little bit as an issue, and certainly the work that you guys have done and other people have done in terms of raising awareness on property values. Was just looking at stats the other day. The property values in Chicago are still rising. However, our downfall lagged the rest of the country to begin with. So if you look at the stats across the rest of the country, residential home prices have started to downtick. So I expect that to happen here in the next 2 quarters. And once we get that situation where property values are downticking, but you see people's property taxes going the other way, right, I think it just forwards the issue to the next level, right? It just becomes a message that resonates louder and louder, and something that can't be ignored. I mean, people don't have unlimited funds, and to in perpetuity dish out more and more in terms of property taxes, it's just untenable.
What sectors, in terms of the businesses that you serve, what sectors are still popping up pretty robust in Chicago Metro, and which are on the wane?
We're seeing pretty strong performance across our portfolio. In terms of, I think that stuff is most visible in manufacturing. We're not seeing it yet, but with the different inputs in terms of labor, raw materials, maybe some of that raw material is imported. stuff that's going on with the tariffs
Yeah.
creates some issues. Typically we start to look for weakness in manufacturing companies when the inventory is sticking around a little longer. The accounts receivable, are being stretched a little more, and payments get stretched. So you start to see the beginning of those stresses just with little indicators. And I really don't think this next downturn, when it happens, is going to be as severe and deep as the last one. But I think it is going to be felt sort of wide swath.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of going to be, it feels like sort of like the midterm elections. It's not going to be a wave. It's going to be a tornado. It's going to touch down worse in some places and not at all in others, based on just the way states are managing their own affairs. Right.
It's interesting with the political cycle with President Trump toward the end of last year, deciding that, he should publicly go after Fed Chairman Powell, which is definitely a departure from presidential decor in the past.
Yeah.
But the interesting part about that is he was going after Powell when the market was sub 22,000 in the Dow, and I'm not saying there's a cause and result here, but Powell and the Fed did back off of their planned 3 rate increases this year. I think at one point there was 4 rate increases priced into the futures market. So he did back off of that. It's certainly the tone at the Fed is a more accommodative policy. I think he's speaking today in front of Congress.
Yeah.
And I read in the Journal this morning that his priorities or his message is going to be steady growth, full employment, and keep inflation at or below 2%. And I think as time marches on, with some of the challenges we have here in Illinois regionally, that's going to be a difficult task.
Yeah, I know. With the Dow back up to north of 26,000, I'm really kicking myself that I have all my money in Bitcoin.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a cryptocurrency guy. He is Kevin Bastuga. He is a co-founder and executive vice president of Signature Bank, where we are broadcasting live in Edison Park this morning, kicking off our AM 560 Signature Bank Business Tour. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.